What's up guys? In this video I'm going to show you how to repair a Clarion CMRC3D hardwired remote. We have two of these in our 2007 Chaparral, one in the front as you can see here, and then one also in the rear. Just to explain what these remotes are doing, they'll both power on. They will display what the radio is showing. The backlights work on both of the remotes. But as you can see here, none of the buttons will respond. What should happen is when you press volume up, volume down, source, it should do that on the main radio, and neither of them are doing that. So I'm going to run through the disassembly of the remote, and after we get it disassembled, I'll show you what the actual problem within the remote is. The first step's removing the rubber backing. It's just glued down. Now that we have the rubber backing off, you can see we have 8 Phillips head screws that we have to remove. Now that the 8 Phillips head screws are removed, we can easily remove the front faceplate just by pulling the remote apart, and we can see the internals of the remote. There are 4 more Phillips head screws that are holding the remote circuit board in place that we need to remove. With those 4 Phillips head screws removed, we can now try to access the back of the remote circuit board. There is a rubber gasket that goes around the outside of the circuit board. You can pull that out. You don't actually have to. The next step, you want to give yourself a little slack by pushing the control wires through the plastic back housing, and that'll give you a little room to work on the back side of the circuit board. These last 2 Phillips head screws that we'll be removing to remove the circuit board, they are actually for the backlighting on the LCD display. So you're just going to remove these 2 Phillips heads, and then you will be able to access the 2 control wires that actually connect the unit to the radio. And when you pull these wires, these connectors out from the back of the circuit board, you want to try and grab the actual plastic connector and not pull by the wires. I have seen them pull out of the connectors before. With the circuit board removed, we can see our root cause of our issues is this IC chip on the outer edge of the circuit board. The legs coming out of the chip do not actually line up like they should with the landing pads on the circuit board. And it could have been caused by a number of things: heat within the enclosure, possibly the jarring around of riding the boat. Either way, we need to reseat this IC chip and get it back functioning properly. The way we're going to do this, we're going to use a process called Reef Lowing, where we use a heat gun to heat up the solder and melt it to where we can adjust the chip. And there's two ways I'm going to show you to do this. The first one, we're going to use this Kapton tape. It's a super heat resistant tape, and all we're going to try to do with this is just try to block off the rest of the board. We only want to heat up the IC chip solder joints. We don't want anything else on the board to heat up and possibly lose connection on something else. So if you don't have the Kapton tape, this is another method that'll work pretty well to try and prevent the heat from the heat gun or hair dryer, whatever you have, uh, from messing up any of the other solder joints on the circuit board. And all you do is just use some aluminum foil, and you do the same thing that I did with the Kapton tape. You just block off the rest of the circuit board and try and isolate that IC chip to where the heat's only hitting on the IC chip. So this is going to be the actual process of reflowing, and I'm using a heat gun, but you can use a hair dryer. Hopefully it will be able to get hot enough. What we need to do, we need to melt this solder, and we need to adjust the chip back. You can kind of see it a little more clearly right here where the legs of the chip are not lined up with the pads on the circuit board. But I'm just going back and forth with the heat gun, heating the solder up, and you'll see here in just a minute I'll use a metal pick to push on the chip to get the legs lined back up. And it shouldn't take very much force if the solder is properly melted. It should just barely slide the chip. You don't want to force it too hard. You can see right here where the leg's actually sliding with the melted solder. This is the exact same process, just with the Kapton tape. I do have two remotes I had to fix, so I just decided to show each method. You can see where the chip slides right there. So now that we've got the chip back where it needs to be, I wanted to add a little extra layer of protection, so I'm going to add a piece of the Kapton tape over the top of it to hopefully help prevent the chip from seeing too much heat, and also maybe help keep it from jarring around while we're on the boat. So after reassembling the remote, we can test out our repair and see how well we did. After getting the backlight hooked up, you can see that the buttons are 100% working now. Volume up, volume down, everything totally working. And this method worked for both of my remotes. They both had the exact same issue. And hopefully that was a permanent fix. Hopefully we don't have to take them back apart anytime soon. But I hope this video helped you out. Thanks for watching.